All right, welcome to this explainer, where we are going to unpack the epic 3,000-year history of ancient Egypt. We're taking all the facts, all the dates, and transforming them into a really clear visual journey. We're talking about one of the world's oldest and, honestly, most absolutely fascinating civilizations. We're going to take this incredibly complex web of history and break it all down so you can see exactly how they rose up, how they thrived, and ultimately, how they fell.
So let's just dive right into this massive time frame because we are looking at one single civilization that maintained incredible dominance for over 3 millennia. I mean, really think about that scale for a second. From roughly 3100 BCE all the way down to 30 BCE, ancient Egypt basically stood as this towering powerhouse of the ancient world. And honestly, just grasping that sheer longevity, it's totally essential if we want to understand the immense legacy they left behind.
Here's how we're going to logically structure our explainer today. We'll start with the gift of the Nile. Then we'll move right into the age of the pyramids, check out the pharaohs, gods, and society, explore the powerful new kingdom, and finally, we'll wrap up with Cleopatra and the legacy.
To kind of map out this massive span of time, we're going to hit some major historical anchors. We're going from the very beginning of the Egyptian state with their unification around 3100 BCE, moving through the monumental Old and New Kingdoms, and then taking it all the way to when Egypt finally became a Roman province in 30 BCE.
Part 1. The Gift of the Nile.
Okay, so the absolute most crucial point to understand right off the bat is that without the Nile River, the Egyptian civilization as we know it simply would not exist. The fact that they developed along this specific river in northeastern Africa, totally no accident. The Nile was the absolute foundation. It was literally the engine that drove their ability to settle down, to grow, and eventually to conquer. But how exactly did a river work like an engine? Well, it all comes down to the flooding. The Nile provided regular, highly predictable flooding. And this wasn't some destructive, chaotic force, right? It was a reliable cycle that deposited this incredibly fertile soil all along the riverbanks. This rich earth is what allowed them to cultivate essential crops. We're talking wheat, barley, vegetables. That agricultural stability allowed their population to absolutely boom and organize, and that directly paved the way for the moment around 3100 BCE when Upper and Lower Egypt were unified into a single state. This monumental unification is traditionally associated with King Narmer, who you might also hear referred to as Menes.
Part 2. Age of the Pyramids.
Now, we are entering the Old Kingdom, and this spans from about 2686 to 2181 BCE. And let's be real, when someone says ancient Egypt, this era is probably exactly the imagery that floods your mind. It's famous for monumental architecture, mostly those iconic pyramids of Giza. Specifically, we're talking about the pyramids built for Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. But the really important takeaway here is their actual purpose. These weren't just big public art installations for people to look at. They were built specifically to be massive, impenetrable royal tombs for their leaders. To really wrap our heads around the scale we're talking about, just think about the number 146. The Great Pyramid of Khufu was originally built to an awe-inspiring 146 meters tall. By utilizing some seriously sophisticated mathematics and engineering, they raised the staggering monument straight up into the sky. It's just an unbelievable testament to what this unified civilization was now capable of achieving.
Which naturally brings us to a really fascinating pivot in our explainer. Who exactly were the gods that demanded massive tombs like this? Like, why invest such unimaginable resources into a burial site?
Part 3. Pharaohs, gods, and society. You have to understand that religion was entirely central to everyday Egyptian life. You literally couldn't separate the mundane from the divine. They worshipped a lot of gods, but the real heavy hitters you need to know are Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Anubis. These deities were believed to dictate everything from the rhythms of the natural world right down to the ultimate fate of the human soul. And this right here is where we get the answer about those massive tombs. Because they firmly, deeply believed that life just kept right on going after death, they couldn't just bury their dead and move on. No way. This core belief led directly to some incredibly elaborate burial practices. This is where we see the development of meticulous mummification, the construction of those towering tombs, and the super careful placement of everyday objects with the dead so that they'd be fully equipped and ready to go for the next world.
And pulling all of this off required a seriously rigid social hierarchy. Right at the very top, you had the pharaohs, who were actually considered divine, or at least divinely connected rulers. Right beneath them sat the nobles and the priests.
Then came the scribes. They're the ones who maintained all that sophisticated administration and written history. Next down were the soldiers and craftsmen. And finally, forming the massive foundation of the entire society were the farmers and laborers. These were the everyday people out there working the fertile soil of the Nile and physically building those 146-meter-tall pyramids.
Part 4. The Powerful New Kingdom.
Jumping forward in the timeline, we arrive at the New Kingdom, which runs from roughly 1550 down to 1070 BCE. And this represents one of Egypt's absolute most powerful and dominant periods on the world stage. We're talking about a true golden age of massive expansion, immense wealth, and these larger-than-life personalities that, honestly, still captivate us today.
I mean, we are talking about a total all-star lineup of historical icons that emerged during this specific window. You have Hatshepsut, standing out as an incredibly successful female ruler. Then there's Thutmose III, a powerful military leader who seriously expanded their borders. You've got Akhenaten, who completely shook the foundation of the state by introducing major religious changes. There is Tutankhamun, the young pharaoh whose tomb eventually became globally famous, and of course Ramesses II, who easily remains one of Egypt's most celebrated kings of all time. The sheer concentration of power and influence in this single era is just staggering.
Part 5. Cleopatra and the Legacy.
But, as the saying goes, all empires face an end. For ancient Egypt, the final century saw a really massive shift in cultural power. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great's conquest brought the country under some very strong Greek influence, ushering in what's known as the Ptolemaic dynasty. The most famous ruler of this era, and actually the very last, was Cleopatra VII. Following her death in 30 BCE, the incredible 3,000-year run of the independent Egyptian state finally concluded, as Egypt officially became just another province of the vast Roman Empire.
But here's the thing. A civilization this massive doesn't just vanish into thin air. Even though the empire fell to Rome, they left behind an extraordinary legacy that actually became the foundation for so much of human knowledge. They gave us monumental architecture and these incredibly complex burial traditions. They left behind thousands of years of written history through their hieroglyphic writing. And their super sophisticated systems of mathematics, engineering, medical knowledge, and advanced agriculture, those ideas rippled through time, literally influencing the very civilizations that ended up conquering them.
So as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final thought to really ponder. How does a civilization that eventually fell to Rome still manage to outlive its conquerors through 3,000 years of immortalized knowledge? They started out as just settlements beside a river, they built monuments to touch the sky, and they generated ideas so powerful they ended up outlasting the pharaohs themselves. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, and keep questioning the history that built our modern world.